members. We have had remarkable stability throughout the last 6 years on the Craig Group. And unfortunately, over the summer, we lost 3 members to retirement and 1 member left the employee of the state. And the new director of the Department of Revenue, Brett Fanning, succeeded Brenda Henson. The interim director of the Wyoming State Geologic Survey and interim state geologist, Dr. Rainey Linz, has succeeded Dr. Aaron Campbell, who is now the state geologist for the state of Alaska. Caleb Simpson he is a senior investment officer and is representing the state treasurer's office on Craig, and succeeded Patrick Fleming, the chief investment officer. And finally, Ryan Yokish from the Office of State Lands and Investments is succeeding the deputy director, Jason Crowder, in that position. So that's quite a bit of turnover, 4 of the 9 positions on Craig. We welcome those new members and appreciate their immediate contributions to our report. I also wanted to acknowledge and recognize this is the first report in the last 50 that has been prepared in the absence of Dean Tempte, who provided incredible contributions to Craig over his service at LSO and the 10 years prior at the Department of Revenue. Our new LSO staff, who are here today, Matt Sackett and Matthew Wilmarth, have been wearing multiple hats and contributed to this greatly. Just a quick side note on that. I think several of you had joined Mr. Wilmarth in the last couple of days in other committee meetings. And while staffing that committee meeting, he was also revising, editing, and checking the numbers on the report before you today. So he was doing some double duty there. And then finally, I wanted to recognize Dr. Winland Liu, who was instrumental in the internal checks and really assisting where Dean Tempte left his absence known. And so thanks to the Economic Analysis Division and Winland Liu. At this point, before jumping into some of the details, I'll pause and see if Co-Chairman Hibbert has anything to say.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kevin Hibbert. I'm the Director of the State Budget Department and also the Co-Chairman of the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group. I would like to just reiterate Don's comment and thank those that have departed the Craig and thank them for their long-term service. And I'd also like to thank those that are joining us now with the Craig, in particular, those people that stepped in to fill the roles of those that have left. And lastly, I would like to thank Don for his leadership. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more comment about the Craig and the Craig process. Almost every state has a revenue estimating group, but they do things differently. Our state to the immediate south, for example, has not a consensus process, but a competitive process. So they have the governor's office, which prepares one revenue forecast, and the legislative branch, which has a separate legislative forecast. And oftentimes their joint appropriations committee, or it's called a budget committee in Colorado, will choose between those two, which forecasts they find more favorable for their purposes. Other states contract it out. Almost a dozen states or more now do not have state employees preparing their revenue estimates, but they have private corporations preparing their revenue estimates. Wyoming, I think, is unique and particularly well positioned, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. We have a number of members from the executive branch, from the university to contribute, but what I think is particularly special about Wyoming is our access to industry and taxpayers. I've gotten 3 emails this morning from one of the largest taxpayers of the state, excited to share their quarterly announcements regarding their production in the state of Wyoming and the profits on that. You don't have that occurring in other states. When we encounter complex questions, which we do almost every year, oftentimes, Craig members pick up the phone and it's one phone call away. I have literally developed those relationships with confidentiality and confidence, and when their government relations associations do not know the answer, they often reach out and say, let's see if we can't get the CFO on the line, or if we can't get a team of accountants on the line to help you out with that. It's a really extraordinary process, and for their contributions, insights, and data, we are greatly appreciative. Now I'll jump into the meat and the substance of the report. Thank you for the indulgence for my introductory comments. I will start with some bottom lines, meaning some takeaways for you. What does this report mean? Then I will talk about some economic themes for the state of Wyoming, what we see in terms of the larger outlook. I will walk you through the report and high level, but talking about each one of the revenue streams, which one's up, which one's down, and why. Then I will take some time to walk you through the goldenrod, or the LSO fiscal profile, and how that relates to the report. First of all, I will mention that fiscal year 2025 exceeded the revenue collections as compared to the January Craig forecast. To be clear, we do not sandbag our estimates. We try and aim to hit the mark, and if we miss, we do try to miss low. So there is a bias in our estimates to the low side. We do not intentionally aim for the ground. We try to hit the target, and as evidence, sales and use taxes and state royalties, two large contributors to state revenue, we overestimated, meaning we collected less money than we anticipated. So we do miss on both sides, as evidenced by sales and use tax and state royalties. On minerals, we were extremely close over the last year. And what do I mean by that, extremely close? On the annual average oil price, we missed it by 66 cents, 2.04%.
Mr. Richards, well done. and Mr. Hibbert as well, and all of Craig. While you're saying these comments about how close Craig has come in the past, or this go around, I would like you to just opine a little bit about how your track record is in the long run as far as forecasting, because there's been a lot of discussion on the floor when we refer to your forecasts that maybe we shouldn't really rely on them that heavily. And my experience is that those forecasts have always been very, very good as far as how they come in, and it's difficult to do. You have to take a lot of information in and really make some good prognostications. So if you could just share with the public, really, what is your success rate as far as prognosticating the future incomes for the state of Wyoming?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. While I started off with a very close one, we do err, we do miss the mark from time to time, and we do so significantly on occasion. All in, we were within 2 or 3% on both the general fund and the school foundation program. That is not outside of the ordinary. We do miss to the low side more often than we miss to the high side. Our worst example was May of 2020. We really missed. I significantly missed our forecast on during COVID. You'll recall it was the first 3 months of COVID in the United States. Oil in April of 2020 was trading at a negative. And we did not have a good grasp of what was going on. And I met with my counterparts in nearly all 50 states around that time via Zoom conference. And I can remember the gentleman from Wisconsin was the only one of the 49 or 50 of us who said, we will not change our estimates. And if we wouldn't have changed our estimates from January of 2020, we would have been remarkably close for the next 2 years in that biennium. What we didn't know at that time we did not know the trillions of dollars of monetary and fiscal stimulus that were about to come the way to all 50 states. We did not know about the $8 billion that was deposited within the state of Wyoming with federal stimulus. And, but we missed it. We missed it by probably 30%. We were definitely to the low side on that, so we do make errors, and we will make an error at some future point. The other issue where we miss, because we don't even try, is forecasting realized capital gains. And I can tell you over the last 20 years, that has been the most contentious issue within Craig. It is the only issue that I'm aware of where we have voted rather than come to a consensus. Both of those votes were 5-4 not to do it, and that maintains our policy of not forecasting realized capital gains. Why? And I just want to give the committee some. It would require us to forecast what markets, international bond markets, domestic equity markets, alternative markets, what they would do over the next 5 to 6 years, and what our investment managers, when they will sell. Now, I think Kevin and I can probably forecast the markets pretty easily, but we can't guess. Now, I'm joking. We can't do that, nor can we.
I was about to make some calls to you guys on some investments, if that were the case.
Nor can we estimate when our managers are going to sell. And we see evidence of that later on in this report, where we have some extraordinary investment gains this year. So we do try to get within that 5%. And Senator Hicks asked for a confidence interval in our forecasts, and that will be discussed at the very end of our discussion. He's not the only one who uses it. Now, S&P 500 in our bond analysis uses that to gauge our accuracy and how much confidence they should have in our work. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and thank you very much for that analysis. And just want to remind the committee and the public, 2 to 3%. In the world that we live in today, that is phenomenal. It's great work. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that the body understands that the work that comes out of Craig is within 2 to 3% on average. And so that's phenomenal work. We appreciate that, and that helps us to do our work. So please continue. Thank you.
Next, I would say that specifically the general fund and budget reserve account revenues exceeded the forecast by $71.9 million. That's all in. That's on over $1.5 billion. We have $71.9 million more than we forecast back in January. In addition, in the intervening months since you left, agencies have reverted $9.4 million. A reversion is unspent revenue or unspent appropriation that expires. So you appropriated funds for a variety of things. About half of that $9.4 million comes from the Wyoming Community College Commission. About a third comes from the State Treasurer's Office, and the remainder is split across 10 or 12 different agencies in rather small amounts. But these are appropriations. In the community colleges, it's likely their health insurance appropriation, because that is a separate line item for the community colleges. And if they have vacancies, unlike K-12, they don't get to retain those funds. It comes back to the state as a reversion.
Sorry to interrupt. That brings up a very important question. So is the Community College Commission, their insurance policy, that is not on the state insurance program, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, it is on the state.
Okay, so why is it that they're getting half of they're making up half of that reversion, quite a lot?
Yeah. Kevin, did you?
Mr. Chairman, to give a little bit of a history on this, in the prior biennium 3 years ago, the question was what do you think the total anticipated reversions for the biennium would be? And I had made some calculations, and I estimated that to be $60 million. And lo and behold, it came in at $60 million. The driving factors behind that is largely the vacant positions, because we don't pay people not to be employed naturally. And then along with that, you have employees group insurance. So if we don't have an employee, then we don't have to pay the insurance. The community college's block grant carries a portion in their budget for EGI, for employees group insurance. that vacancy savings or that EGI portion of it leads to that reversion. We anticipate to have some reversions again in the end of this biennium. I don't believe it's going to be 60 million. I put a number out there for you, but maybe I'll do that for you later. But that's what's causing that.
Mr. Hibbert, what would you attribute this reduction from 60 million down to 10 million?
I didn't put the number on the table of 10 million. I said it was previously, it was 60 million. We have had some success filling positions. You know, with the compensation packages that the legislature has approved, we have been able to turn that marginally around. So we're going to carry fewer vacancies. Also, the narrowness of the budget amount in for EGI and the actual cost of EGI is getting closer. So that would lead to fewer reversions predicated on the difference between what we estimate for EGI and what the actual EGI cost would be.
Mr. Chairman, and also to add a little bit of context, the 60 million in reversion was at the end of a biennium, so that would occur in the even-numbered years. We're in an odd-numbered year, so we would expect smaller amounts of reversions. These are encumbrances that don't get liquidated, and that type of activity.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your latitude on this. You're correct, the 9.4 million is the one that you assumed, and that is just a portion of reversions as we progress through the biennium. The other aspect was, as Don's absolutely right, the $60 million was for a full biennium. And as we approach the end of the biennium, we anticipate to have further reversions that we've been discussing.
On the school foundation side, to compare to that 71.9 million on the general fund side, the SFP exceeded our forecast by 72.4 million, almost the same amount. On the school foundation program, it was almost entirely due to investment earnings. In addition, the school foundation program also benefited from reversions of $26 million, more particular, $25.99 million. In the school's case, nearly all of this came late this fall related to school capital construction projects dating back to 2015, 10 years ago. Those projects are now being fully completed through their warranty period, and the department is reverting those funds. The largest of those reversions came from appropriations made in 2019 and 2023, but there are some dating back 10 years to 2015. So when a project comes in under budget, and they do, as evidenced by this $26 million, once the project gets fully wrapped up, those monies are reverted to the school foundation program account.
Are there any questions from the committee? Before we move on, I would like to ask something along the lines of what you just brought up, Mr. Richards. We do tend to, because we don't want, we do tend to overestimate when we appropriate for capital construction, because we don't really want the bids to be based on what we've appropriated. Are you seeing a trend in our capital construction models where we're appropriating a larger and larger percentage, which we might expect to have more reversions in the future? Or are we still on the same track that we were 10 years ago that have led to this $26 million reversion we're seeing today? Just your analysis of kind of where we are trending as a state on capital construction and our general appropriations at the beginning of the process.
In my opinion, I think it's rather steady. I would note that the legislature has maybe matured in its process where you are now appropriating 6% for unanticipated costs on top of a contingency, on top of a inflation adjustment in those high inflation years of 21, 22, 23. So you kind of had a triple cushion there. And I think in this bill, you have the contingency and the unanticipated costs, nothing for inflation in the current proposal. But I think over time, that $26 million is indicative of reversions that we've experienced with other projects.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don, I just want to make sure I'm tracking this. So with school expenditures, it's not as much that we overestimate. We put in the different contingencies that you mentioned, but I think the big change that we've done is where we pool together the expenditures. So what we do now is instead of putting one line, one school, one price, which telegraphs the amount of money that we're putting, is that we put it all in a lump and then list all the schools. So we're not telling the contractors potentially what the amount that we're projecting each one to be. So we're not necessarily overestimating outside of normal contingencies now. Would that be a fair characterization?
I think that is fair, and another point of maturing in the process. On the school side, this is pretty new, where we have a lump sum and then all of the schools listed. On the state side, we have a little bit more history on that, where we lump 6, 7 projects under level 1 studies, and the architects really don't know how much money is allocated to the project that they are bidding on. Arguably, that has the potential to generate some savings in the long run as well. We're not telegraphing. Anyone interested in a $250,000 contract?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the point, is that we should anticipate continued reversions along these lines based on your analysis of the way we've been doing business. So thank you. Please proceed.
Next, I would mention that the general fund and SFP aren't the only accounts that we look at. And on the state side, many legislators look at the general fund, budget reserve account, and LSRA all together as one lump sum. And if you do that in this Craig report, all in on the general fund BRA LSRA side, we are $88.5 million ahead for the biennium. That includes all FY25, our forecast for 26, the reversions, the legislation that was already incorporated into the LSO profile, parimutuel revenues, which are increasing and are currently not part of the Craig forecast. And then something I will talk about when we visit about sales and use tax, a reduction in the amount anticipated that will be transferred to WYDOT, the Wyoming Department of Transportation. You'll recall last year there was a bill that says sales and use taxes on vehicles shall be directed to the Wyoming Department of Transportation. It's very similar to the request made to you by, and it'll be before you this session potentially, or this meeting, on local governments. They want to tie themselves to a particular revenue stream. Well, when you do that, you take the peaks and the valleys. And unfortunately, when it comes to vehicle sales, they're down. And they're down fairly significantly. And that estimate last year of $69.2 million has been reduced to $62 million for that transfer. The law didn't change, but the number of vehicle purchases is changing. Undoubtedly, a year, 2, 5, 10 years, that will grow. But we're going through a softer period when it comes to those sales and use tax collections. Per year. Next, I will also mention that the School Foundation Program, all in, is ahead of our forecast by $173.2 million. Most of that was the revenues, which I mentioned previously, that $72.4 million. But on School Foundation, expenditures also matter. Reimbursables for special education, reimbursables for transportation, local property taxes, all of that is incorporated in the formula. And we have a reduction of $79.5 million forecast in payments to school districts. Their property taxes are higher than we anticipated. We knew this in some respect, in that we appropriated the maximum amount of money during the session to fully fund schools. But we did not know all of the outcome of the House and Senate bills with respect to reduction in residential property tax. And you'll recall there were some folks that wanted 25%, some 50%, some in owner-occupied, some all residential. So we had to make an estimate. So we knew we were a little on the high side there. And this is the reconciliation of that high side. There's also
Sorry to interrupt, but so that high side recommendation, it's equating to about 100 million on the school foundation program side. Is that an accurate number?
Mr. Chairman, it's 79.5 million. And we will discuss that in the profile when we walk through it. You'll see that number, right? No legislative action is necessary. That will automatically come back to the school foundation program. It just won't be spent on schools.
And does that affect the amount that we were looking at coming out of the LISRA as the backstop? Or is that going to be a separate issue?
Mr. Chairman, this is only for this biennium, so it really does not affect the LSRA in the near term, but it does affect it when you get out to 2030, because there's more money left in the school foundation program, so it delays the need for an LSRA influx.
And so I guess based on what you're saying, we're not anticipating at the end of this biennium that we're about to approach having a reduction in the LISRA for the school foundation program.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. For FY 25-26, the current biennium, and FY 27-28, we are currently not forecasting a need for a backfill from the LSRA. However, big however here, and that was later on in my presentation, that does not take into account anything you might do with respect to a recalibration, and it does not take into effect what you might do in 28, fiscal year 28, for an external cost adjustment, which would be the next opportunity for that. So those are big what ifs. Depending on the outcome of those decisions, it is possible that the LSRA support will be needed in the next biennium.
Thank you for covering that. I would like to back up just a moment on the sales tax on vehicles discussion that you just did. And that, again, those funds are now being transferred by law to the Department of Transportation. It has been in the news lately that there's a $400 million deficit in the money available for our Department of Transportation. That is based on a study. I think the study is 4 or 5 years old. Is that correct, Mr. Richards? Mr. Hibbard?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's, I don't know the exact date, but around there.
But this 62 million is a mitigation of that overall $400 million. So the legislature in 2025 did take action to reduce that $400 million anticipated shortfall. So
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Thank you.
Last kind of overall bottom line, and it is an important one. I'm going to bring it up a couple of times. You'll probably hear me bring it up in December as well. We had a unique circumstance this year where our investment income was so high, record levels of investment income. And by the Constitution and Act of Admission, investment income on the common school must go for expenditures on K-12. So it has to go to the school foundation program. The legislature back in 2001 created a fund swap, and it used federal mineral royalties to build up the reserve account on the Common School Permanent Land Fund reserve account. There were low amount of FMRs, so minerals did not so good this year, that past year. Investments knocked it out of the park. So we have $70.3 million that normally, in the last 20 years, has always been deposited into the Common School Permanent Land Fund reserve account, for which there is no revenue available to make that deposit. That's fine. Statute basically contemplates that, but now it is a policy choice for legislatures. If you wanted to remedy that, we'll offer you two options. One, you could transfer money from the school foundation reserve account, where there's $88 million. It's a savings account for K-12, and you could move that over to the reserve. Option two, you could direct FY 27-28 FMRs in the amount of $70,300,000 to the reserve account. So two options if you wanted to restore that savings, or you could do nothing. That's entirely, but it is an unusual circumstance where we had these record investments. We didn't have enough money to swap because the minerals were insufficient compared to our investments. So if you wanted to adhere to that longstanding policies, there's two options for remedying that issue.
Mr. Richards, just for the committee's edification, as we approach that policy decision, the 27, 28 FMRs, is Craig anticipating them being sufficient to accomplish that?
Mr. Chairman, we are, and arguably, we could have used 26, but the legislature already took the position of saving those. So in 27, 28, we are anticipating sufficient FMRs to do this. Mr. Chairman, now I'll move into some large trends facing the economy and state revenues of the state of Wyoming. First off, and a theme throughout this report, is oil prices are down. That impacts severance taxes, federal mineral royalties, ad valorem taxes or mineral property taxes, state royalties. It flows through almost every account within the state of Wyoming. And we have revised our oil prices down significantly to accommodate that. Secondly, sales and use taxes are also declining. It was the first year-over-year decline in about 5 years. It is not an inspiring report, particularly when you look at what counties are lower and what industries are lower. Mining is off over 20%. Construction is off. Wholesale trade. And when you think wholesale trade, think windmills. So big industrial projects all down. What is buoying this is retail, lodging, accommodations. It's the consumer. And in particular, it is the consumer of wealthier households, not the low-income households that are continuing to buoy the state's sales and use tax collection. But our traditional industries are clearly declining, and that gives some reason for pause. Next, and you've certainly read this in the papers, we have written about it and spoke about it, we've incorporated the reduction in coal royalties from 12.5% to 7%. This appears on the bottom of page 2 of our green report, or 27, excuse me, the bottom of page 27. We did this in 2 different ways. Neither is maybe perfect, but we wanted to accommodate both philosophies on this. If you look at just the coal volumes at the current level and at the reduced rate, the forecast is a reduction of $65 million in this next fiscal year, declining to about $48.6 million. That equates to my rough number this summer, which was about $50 million. Well, that may not be right. And the reason why that may not be right is, well, with this lower royalty rate, we also have increased production, and we do, 10, 12% increase in production. So maybe you should incorporate that increased production. So we did that with another caveat, and that is that increased production is probably due to other things, not just the reduction in the royalty rate. It's probably due to increased demand for electricity, competitiveness of coal prices, regulatory relief from the new administration. So there are probably some other things in there that are contributing to the volume growth in coal. But if you take into account volume growth, this next year, we forecast the reduction in FMR royalty would be $53.8 million. And by 2030, it's reduced to 36.1. So it is declining over time. So my $50 million per year is kind of in between those two, because the first one's probably a high estimate, second one's a low.
Mr. Richards, you and I and my co-chair have been in conversations with the administration, or actually just with our federal electeds, in an effort to try to mitigate some of this change in the short term. In a letter that we requested that the federal government maybe change the percentages that we receive versus them in the short term, but we were told in those conversations that the administration anticipates the long-term outcome to be increased production, and I assume that based on what you just said, you're taking that into account as well for down the road, anticipating more mining based on these lower FMRs and a better business atmosphere. So I know you're talking about it currently, but are you seeing that also in the long run?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, absolutely. In both of our analyses, the trend line is downward. Now, it will take a considerable amount of time to get to zero. And the reason being is that royalty rate reduced by 44%. That's a big reduction in the percentage rate of taxes. So if you were to fully accommodate that, it would arguably need a 44% increase in production. That's about just shy of 100 million tons. So to put that in perspective, the new coal plant, maybe a couple million tons for the new unit proposed, and several years at the Dry Fork Station. The Oakland port is, potentially a couple of years away, maybe several years away at 10 million tons. We need all those little things to add up to around 90 million tons. So it's going to take a while. Now some positives. We've talked about some negatives: sales and use taxes, oil, federal mineral royalty rate. Natural gases are one where there is a real bright spot. We're 70 cents to $1 higher per MCF than we were last year at this time. Why is that, and what do we see going forward? I call this the alphabet soup: LNG, AI, NGL. So LNG meaning liquefied natural gas. We're exporting a lot of natural gas out of the United States. That's generating worldwide demand for our product. It's bolstering our prices. AI, that's artificial intelligence. The computing electricity requirements are generating increased demand for electricity, i.e. natural gas generated electricity and coal. And then NGL, which is natural gas liquids. Within our stream, we have both the methane as well as liquids like butane and propane. Well, those liquids actually generate a larger amount of money. They garner a higher price. And Wyoming's natural gas stream arguably is wetter, meaning it has more liquids in it than it did 10 years ago. Well, why is that? 10 years ago, we had a lot of coal bed methane. That was dry gas, right? In the Campbell County, it didn't have the propane, butane in considerable volumes. Well, now that is declined significantly, and we have this associated gas from the Converse County oil wells. We have the Western Wyoming gas. It's a wetter gas, so we're benefiting from a premium there on the liquids as well. Investments are another bright spot. We have higher balances. Yes, Mr.
Sorry to interrupt. I want to stay on the gas for just a moment. I've received some news about exports, and I'd like to hear what you and Craig are hearing about gas exports right now, if you have any information on that.
Yes, we are at all-time exports, and there are multiple, almost every year, the United States, will be completing construction on new LNG facilities for exports, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that is where it is driving it, but it certainly has an impact on, excuse me. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Yes, a majority of that is being exported there. However, there are export terminals in Maryland. There are discussions of export terminals. In fact, Canada is just finishing up one in Vancouver on the Pacific side. So the robust growth, and it really is Asia as well as European demand for U.S. natural gas. And that is certainly one of the three big drivers of the Craig forecast.
Good. Thank you. So please
Mr.
continue.
Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Richards, sorry, I missed, I got the LNG and the NGL, but the last part of the alphabet soup I didn't catch. I don't know if we talked about it yet, but was wondering if we could cover that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, the last part was AI, which is the increased demand for artificial intelligence and enhanced computing.
Okay, I think we're ready to proceed with your next subject there.
Two other areas where we're seeing some real increases is our other revenue. These are not nearly as exciting to talk about with oil, natural gas, or investment, sales, and use tax. What are these other revenues? Corporate filing fees, insurance agent filing fees, cost allocation, Kevin, franchise taxes, liquor taxes, wind taxes, but they all are becoming an increasing part of Wyoming's general fund. About, I think, $240 million a year in all of these other revenue sources. Particularly, we're seeing growth in three areas. Our corporate filing fees, including LLCs. I think the LLC has increased in the last 6 years from about 4 million to about 24 million. It is on a pretty considerable growth. That's an annual number of filing fees that we're, as a state, generating from these corporations.
Could you repeat, over what period of time has that increase happened?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's over about 6 years. And maybe one of my staff could look that up. It's in the other revenue report line from the EAD survey. But I think it's 6 years, gone from 4 million to 24 million. And we'll see if they can confirm that while I proceed, if that's acceptable. The next area, and last, I believe, on my sheet of trends, is non-mineral assessed valuation. That's residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture property. We've had a lot of legislation in this area, the 25% reduction, the 50% long-term homeowner, the business tax, property tax floor of $75,000. Senator French, was involved with that in your work on the Revenue Committee. You also had a revision to the depreciation schedule. All of those have considerable impact on business and residential property. But what we are comfortable with now is saying all of that is kind of shaking out. Those are becoming knowns, and we still see a 2% growth underlying that under the 4% cap, but for residential, commercial, industrial property tax growth. So despite all of those other exemptions, you have industrial property continues to grow, and it didn't benefit from any of these exemptions. You have residential property that has an exemption, but its value is still growing under the 4% cap, but it's still growing year over year. So all of those, previously, we had, our January forecast had a flatline growth rate of 0%. So you put a 2% growth, it doesn't sound like much, but a 2% growth on a $10 billion number and compound that out 5 years, and it's real money. So that you will see has a big impact on our K-12 forecast in the long term. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my my comments on the trends and the bottom lines. I'm prepared to visit a little bit about the components, and then we'll jump into the profile if that meets your expectations.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Richards, so as we're looking at that 2% increase potential that we're seeing on those property tax bases, we do have a ballot initiative that we see coming down the pipeline with a 50% ballot initiative. Could you talk to us what that, I mean, and maybe we need to get this down the road, but what that may look like if that 50% property tax increase or decrease would go into effect, what that projection forecast would look like? Yes, we're actually developing that estimate for the Revenue Committee in November, so I don't have a number to share for you. And Mr. Sackett can correct me, but it really is nothing in statute. This was debated on the floor, but it really is 50% on top of what you have already approved. So it really would be a 75% reduction because it's already at 25%. And the way that language is written, it's 50% on top of the current amount. So properties would be impacted by a total of 75%. I don't think the numbers are ready to share, but we can certainly, as soon as we get that for the Revenue Committee, we'll forward that to the Appropriations Committee as well.
Mr. Richards, and I know it's a moving target because there's a lot of moving pieces there, but also that particular initiative is not the same type of property. It does not include the land. So, you know, compared to the 25% that we just passed in this last session, this 50% would look like 33%, I believe, just on rough estimates. So it's not quite a 75% reduction compared to what we're looking at. So I think there's a lot of other factors that are going to come in if that were to pass.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don, before we leave talking about trends, I'll just talk a little bit. And I think the chairman's brought up a very valid point talking about your accuracy how Craig puts this all together and how well you do it. Would it be fair, though, to say, let's go back, jump in the Wayback Machine for a minute and go back to biennium and look at what you were forecasting for today, back then. And at that point, the crystal ball isn't quite as clear. I'm sure you probably didn't anticipate a 25% reduction in property tax or an $819 million, dividend, unanticipated revenue from unrealized capital gains, things like that, or a number of legislative agenda items such as, things like in the school realm with charter schools and funding mechanisms for all that. Without all those pieces, it's pretty difficult to forecast 2 biennium out. And so the spread becomes a little bigger when you're looking at that, or maybe looking 2 biennium ahead. Would that be a fair statement?
Respond to that, Mr. Richardson. I do want you to respond to that. But I think we need a little bit of clarity. Craig estimates revenues rather than expenditures. And so when we start talking about expenditures, that is a moving target that I don't think any of us would anticipate Craig trying to forecast that. But please go ahead with your response.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, I think you do have a point. When you go back 4 years, I can recall sitting here and visiting about some positives at that time. We were looking at higher sales and use taxes, higher property taxes, and really robust oil prices 4 years ago. The higher property and sales taxes were generated a lot by inflation. This was the 7, 8, 9% era around 4 years ago. Nevertheless, you are accurate. We forecast, I kind of used my all-in number on the LSRA, we forecast about 1.7 billion to end in 4 years ago. And in truth, it ended up at 1.86 billion. So we underestimated just on the revenue side. And you're exactly correct, Mr. Chairman. We can't possibly forecast the reduction in federal rental royalty rates, severance tax rate changes, expenditure side, any policy on the revenue or expenditure side that you, as a legislature, wish to influence.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and I know that you don't anticipate expenditures, but sometimes expenditures that we make affect revenues coming in, and sometimes greatly. And so, that's what I was talking about as far as not being able to actually see that clearly. And then as time goes by and those things become more clear, then those numbers get adjusted and honed down. For example, I'm just thinking my time here, we've seen oil from minus 40 to plus $120 a barrel, maybe more on the low side there, a couple of points in time, and just sometimes during short periods of time. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is absolutely correct. And many of our revenue sources are extremely volatile, third most volatile in the nation, and very difficult to predict. We are fortunate that, unlike Alaska and North Dakota, we do have some stools, some legs of our stool. They do not. So Alaska is they're all in on oil. If oil is down like we're anticipating it is in prices, we've got natural gas, we've got coal, we've got trona. We have a little bit more of a diversity of our portfolio. But Senator, you're exactly correct. We're forecasting in a very volatile environment.
One last follow-up.
Go ahead, follow up.
Thank you. I got in my hand the S&P Global Ratings review that we received in September of this last year, where our bond rating went up to AA+. And reading from it, it says, it quotes some of the reasons why that went up. And it says extraordinary reserves that help mitigate swings in mining-related revenue collections, extremely low debt, also transparency in budgeting. and the fact that we've been able to put away more in savings in the last two biennium than ever in the history of the state, all leading to that bond rating. So actually, you know, when we talk about these things, and sometimes when we talk about these numbers, we kind of get some pluses and minuses, but I think this is something that you all, that Craig, that all of us can take a great deal of solace in, that some of the things that we're doing here have led to a more robust credit rating than we've had, and a roadmap on how to get it higher. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Richards?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, that is a great point, and a notable one, so much so that on page 3 of our report, we did quote, maybe not quite the same sentence that you quoted, I know you just got the report, but something very similar to that. Wyoming's bond rating or credit rating did increase from AA to AA+, and I think a lot of that is reflective of legislative action, budget monitoring, conservative revenue forecasting is specifically called out, as well as high revenues, or high reserves, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. And I think the good senator points out a great point that, you know, this body really needs to watch the purse strings. That's our purview, and I think he's made a great point that we should be careful in how we go forward in creating spending policies for the state of Wyoming. So we'll keep an close eye on that. Do good work. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thanks to folks at the staff table on that other revenue. One of you asked a question, and I apologize, I can't recall what member asked this on our corporate filing, particularly LLC's filing. I was pretty darn close. In fiscal year 19, those were 4.1 million. I think I said 4. And in fiscal year 25, it was 21 million. So very close to that growth rate that I reflected. So over the last 6 years, a multiple of 5 on those fees, which is considerable.
Thank you for checking that. Representative Pendergraft has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding that trend, do you think that's something that's going to plateau, or is that going to continue to grow? What are your thoughts?
Mr. Richards?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I think there is still opportunity for that to grow. And I know these are policy choices for you, but it is known in the world of, you know, corporate filings that we are a very competitive state. At the same time, there are a couple of states, South Dakota, Delaware, that are also competing in this arena, among others, likely. I think there's still additional opportunity, and to support that comment, we send out a survey to all agencies. We sent out a survey on this topic to the Secretary of State's office, Craig did, and they responded, and they're the ones who administered this, and they incorporated continued growth over the next couple of years. Maybe not at quite this pace, but it's still a positive slope.
Mr. Richards, I have a follow-up on that. We're really focused on the LLC filings, I think, and do you see these other states going after other types of business filings, or are they trying to get into the LLC business?
You know, Mr. Chairman, I think Wyoming is arguably a leader in the LLCs, but I think other states are noticing what Wyoming is doing, so I am anticipating some competition.
Just to revisit the property tax, just to wrap our mind around what you're saying, the 2% increase. So even after all the property tax adjustments that we made in the last session, you're seeing a 2% increase in revenue. How's that all flowing together? Calculated reductions based on taxpayer exemptions, and yet the revenue stream is increased by 2%. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the clarification. And if I could direct your attention to the last page on the green report, that table 9. The second to last column on the right is called other property. And this is the non-mineral property, industrial, commercial, and agriculture and residential property. So we definitely saw a decline, and you'll see that from the $17 billion assessed value. That's not taxes, this is assessed value, down to 15.5. So there is undoubtedly a decline, and that's directly attributable to the residential property tax and business depreciation and personal property tax bills that this legislature has passed. But after you reduce that, and you'll see on that baseline of $15.65 billion, then you'll see that 2% start to kick in future years. We're still below, and we will be for another several years, below the tax year 2020, or production year 2023 amount of $17 billion. But if you look out there by 2029, we will have recovered completely from that exemption. So it's not immediate. It definitely dropped it down, but now we're growing at a 2% rate. Just some real quick highlights now in the interest of time and wanting to get to some fiscal profile comments. We reduced oil prices $10 to $15 per barrel lower. Arguments for this is the world surplus is developing. We look at the futures market, we look at forecasters, and I would note that some forecasters, including EIA, which is the Federal Energy Information Administration that forecasts oil prices, are even seeing worse opportunities. But it is much better to be at $55 a barrel in our forecast and maybe having to reduce that down to 50 than it is at 70. So we've moved that down to right size oil prices. On natural gas prices, we visited about this and the opportunities and optimism for growth. We still need winter weather. That is the number one driver of the use of natural gas, is some heating for residential and commercial buildings. Also of some concern in the state of Wyoming, over the past 15 years, the production of natural gas in the state is down by 52.8%. It's almost on the same decline rate as coal. Again, it is not a lack of supply and opportunity to develop wells in Wyoming, but our competitors in the Permian Basin, the Appalachian Basin, they are closer to markets. They're closer to Chicago, and they're closer to the Gulf of America for export purposes. In coal, we have increased our production throughout by 15 to 25 million tons per year. That is undoubtedly a result of a number of factors, including more favorable regulations, competitive pricing for royalties, demand for electricity, and the like. That continues throughout the forecast. However, we still have a declining curve, meaning we're at 15 to 20 million tons higher, but it's still down and to the right, which is not a positive for the state of Wyoming. We also have some robust coal prices, but we have some concerns on that as well. And our concerns there is the PRB coal continues to have a decent prices and sufficient to cover their costs. But the western coal in Wyoming, the Kemmerer mine, for example, that generates larger dollar per ton, considerably larger dollar per ton. And to the extent the western Wyoming coal in Sublette County, or excuse me, Sweetwater County and Lincoln County, to the extent those decline, it really does impact our average Wyoming price, because you're selling that western coal at such a premium to the Powder River Basin coal. On Trona, we do see increasing production modestly from a lower starting point. We also have paused our price forecast around $80 a ton on Trona, and I would note that the Trona prices is our number one miss. Last fiscal year, in our forecast, we missed by 11%. Trona prices over the past 2 years have had about a 50% movement, and that is very unusual for Trona. They have considerable competition from synthetic Trona developed in foreign countries. On our sales and use tax, we did reduce our FY26 amount, speaking to our reliance on the consumer now as opposed to heavy industry, as well as our by-county sales and use tax collection. Our smaller counties in the Bighorn Basin are doing better, but if you dig into that a little bit deeper, it's largely due to administrative activities, meaning rebates to producers. And our big counties, the Campbell counties, the Sweetwater counties, are not generating the sales taxes that they did just 1 year ago. I have several comments on investments. We generated 1.86, the state generated $1.86 billion, or 6.2%, on our $32 billion portfolio. We exceeded the spending policy amounts in every account. We have higher income, higher market values, higher spending policy amounts. Was this due to harvesting gains? And I would say that is not the case. The state generated $804 million in the PMTF, $427 million in the Common School Permanent Land Fund last year. This will be difficult to replicate year after year, but the state has the conditions set to develop a much more robust investment program. It was fortunate, I think, to recognize former CIO Patrick Fleming, and that these record amounts came in his final year. We have exceeded that 5%, that 5X on the PMTF now. We are just shy of that on the Common School Permanent Land Fund, but we have the legislature has already appropriated funds that will now get deposited over the next 12 months to the Common School Permanent Land Fund, and that fund will also be above 5X. Let me put this in a little bit more perspective. This is the first year ever that the investment earnings on the PMTF exceeded sales and use taxes deposited into the general fund. In total, investment income, that $1.86 billion, well, how does that compare to, say, I don't know, severance taxes and FMRs collectively? $1.2 billion. So investment earnings had 25% more than severance taxes and FMRs combined. I can't overemphasize the amount of money that was generated from the savings of the state for this. I'm not advocating or endorsing any of those policies, but I would acknowledge the prior action of the legislature in terms of their investment policy, the savings in those funds, the increases to money management, the authorization to invest in alternatives, increasing the reserve amounts. All of this is contributing to these outsized gains. I would also express some caution. We know, just as of yesterday, short-term interest rates are declining. That means our cash that is invested will earn less money. Our yields will be declining. Investments are inherently volatile. You've heard that commercial. Past performance is not indicative of future results. But we do have larger markets values invested at lower yields, so we were able to increase our forecasts pretty much across the board on investments. And I also think I've visited about the non-mineral assessed values, so I do want to touch base briefly on Appendix A, which appears on page 35 of the Craig report. There were some questions early in the presentation about our errors, and I think this is 4 nice graphics that illustrate our forecast will be wrong when I'm back here visiting with you the next time. We will have an error, and these dotted lines illustrate some level of confidence interval as to what you might expect. There are 4 visual charts, one for sales tax, one for severance tax, one for FMRs, and one for assessed value. The history is shown in a shaded area. Our confidence interval here is a 70% confidence interval. That's roughly 1 standard deviation, and that's shown in dotted lines. Our last estimate in January is shown in a solid line with an X on it, and the Craig forecast in October 2025 is shown as a dashed line. There are a few takeaways here. Number one, that 70% interval is based upon our prior error rates. So 70% of the time, we're going to be within that dashed interval. That also means that 3 out of 10 years, we're going to be outside of that dotted line. So you will have an extraordinary event. You will also see that dotted dashed line, and I'm looking on page 36, chart A1 at the top of the page. That dashed line is below the midpoint between the 2 dotted lines. You see the dotted lines are that confidence interval. The dashed line's a little bit closer to the bottom one than it is to the top one. That's our inherent bias, I would say, towards the downside. We don't pick exactly the middle line and go with that. So we have reduced our forecast, and you can see the dashed line is below the solid line from January. You can see on severance taxes, we're also in the bottom half of that confidence interval, and we have reduced the forecast near term and increased it in the out years. We're a little bit more bullish on coal and natural gas in the out years. Similarly on page 37 on federal mineral royalties. I do want to mention briefly the assessed valuation. Gosh, that confidence interval in 2025, that's production year, so that's tax year 2026, you can hardly make out the difference there between the dotted lines and the dashed lines and the solid lines. What that means is we have an excellent error rate on that because it is so narrow that you can't even distinguish between the differences there. You also will see that big decline. Well, that was not an error rate. That is the implications of legislation. That's the exemption legislation that you've passed. You also see that extraordinary growth. And that extraordinary growth is 2 things. One, that's the strength of oil prices in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. That's also the extraordinary inflation that was built into the residential property taxes assessed valuation. So I wanted to at least touch on that appendix.
Mr. Richards, you just mentioned being bullish on the future of coal. I was curious, if you had any comments in regard to the Oakland export port and yours or Craig's thoughts on what impact that might have on Powder River or Western Wyoming coal.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think it's fair to say it was a robust discussion in Craig, but our current forecast does not anticipate any Wyoming coal going out of that port through fiscal year 2030. So if that comes to occurrence, it would be additive to our baseline forecast. Well, why is that? Couple of reasons. Number one, we do have to compete with Utah, which also has coal and is a lot closer in terms of transportation. So they may be first in line in terms of competitiveness. Additionally, despite the movement there, there are still numerous hurdles for that project in terms of financing, in terms of additional permits for the construction to convert that for a coal facility. So we did not see any indication at this time. We're hopeful, but we didn't see any indication at this time that Wyoming would have a defined contract for X million tons on that. So it's all blue sky at this point.
I do, thank you for that clarification. I do realize it's prognosticating, but if it were to be successful, even if it were only affecting Utah and not Wyoming, would that relieve pressure on other markets domestically where Wyoming would benefit from that, in your anticipation?
Mr. Chairman, that is always a possibility. You know, our Powder River Basin coal is extraordinarily competitive. So if there is any reduction in the supply, domestic use from the Utah production, that is certainly Powder River Basin coal can fill that gap and then some. Montana is also a player in this, but my own opinion is I think Wyoming has an advantage over Montana because of the location of that terminal, just like Utah has a advantage arguably on Wyoming. Now, if it were Washington terminal and not Oakland, then I think the advantage might be on the Montana side, Wyoming right behind them.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Donna, we kind of skipped by this kind of quickly, and I just want to go back and make sure that we have it because it's kind of a big deal. But Matt can talk to us about actually reaching 5X across all the accounts and exactly what that means from how Craig looks at things now going forward, knowing, I mean, given, and we know investments are always, you know, 1 year to the next one, never knows. So like you said, you can't, not indicative of future performance. But to reach that 5X, in addition to where we are with our other reserve accounts, with where we are with the LISR and everything else, from Craig's point of view, you know, how do you view that? And just explain what 5X means across the enterprise for some of the newer members.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, this really is an important threshold. The legislature gave or authorized the state treasurer's office to invest those reserve accounts more aggressively several years ago, more aggressively than a checking account, which is where the money has been for a considerable amount of time. The state treasurer's office came back and said, we are not going to invest this more aggressively. We're going to maintain it in a checking account because we don't know when you're going to use it. And we can't invest these in private equity or hedge fund or even equities and be forced to sell at a bad time. So we had over $1 billion sitting in short-term treasuries. This is not the most favorable investment for $1 billion. And the Treasurer's Office and the Select Committee on Capital Finance came to an agreement, as recommended by the CIO at the time, that said, hey, if you get us to 5X, meaning we have a 5-year outlook for the guarantee, we can invest this more aggressively. Sure enough, and you'll see this on the Treasurer's report, we're investing it in what they call total return liquid, which is a diversified portfolio of equities, long-term corporate bonds, some alternatives. And in any given year, it may not beat that checking account interest rate, but over a 10-year period, it should dramatically beat that. So now, at the end of this year, we will have right at $1.7 billion invested much more aggressively with much more opportunity for the state than a checking account. It is a big threshold moment. Mr. Chairman, if I could draw your attention for the last 10 or 15 minutes of the presentation to our LSO fiscal profile. That is the gold sheet here. I'll just walk you across a number of key points, and I know this is a bit dry of a material. What is this document to begin with? It is a forecast of the state's check register as of June 2026. So we're forecasting what our check register would look like. It's not a balance sheet, it's not an income statement, it's a forecast of your check register if this was a household. And I like to start at the back page first, page 7. We add this additional page twice a year in October and January, and it gives you a sense of what changed since March. And you can see sales and use taxes. These are going to confirm a lot of my prior comments. Sales and use taxes, we have reduced in actual revenue and forecast revenue by $54.9 million. That reduction is indicated by a parentheses. That means it's a negative number. Then you can see severance taxes, we actually increased by about $5.2 million, not that much of a change. Investment income, $583 million more than we forecast back in March. And $504 million, that's on line 18, revised expenditures appropriation, that $504 million was automatically sent to savings under that spending policy. So we generated $583 million more than we thought we would, and almost all of it went to those reserve accounts. You never saw it. They called it years ago, prior committee in July, they'd come and ask me and said, how much secret savings do we have? And that's the number. I know I'm using some colloquial terms. You had $504 million in secret savings that you did not know was going to happen when you left in March, and now you have all of the investment results. That money was not spent. It went to a reserve account. You can see the budget reserve account, not much change. A little bit up in severance taxes, a little down in FMRs. There's part of that coal reduced rate there. The legislative stabilization reserve account, line 39 on page 7. It's not quite my most important number of the day, but that's all in. What has changed? $88.5 million. You've got $88.5 million that's accessible to you, the legislature, than when you left in March. So I kind of circle that number. On the school foundation program, you'll see very similar trends. Line 44 generated $200 million more than anticipated in investments. And then you see it on line 50, that got transferred out. $118 million is that savings or automatic savings. It should be closer to that 203. So you can come and ask me, you said, Don, look at the general fund. Almost all of it went to savings. What happened here on the school foundation? We're missing $70 million, give or take. That's the $70 million I talked about early on, that there's insufficient FMRs to move. So that number on line 50 should be, $190 million. It isn't because there's insufficient FMRs to put into savings. And then line 70 through 86 is a good reference to Senator Garu's comments about the increase to 5X, that $519 million addition, the $189 million addition to the Common School Permanent Land Fund. That's evidence of that exact information. I do want to point out two more numbers on this page 7. I skipped over. On line 51, that's the $79.3 million in our lower anticipated expenditures by school districts. That is some on transportation and special ed, but the bulk of that is higher local property taxes than anticipated. And that's our area because we didn't know exactly which property tax bill was going to pass last year. And you'll see, oh, they didn't spend that. It goes right back into the balance of the SFP. No action needed by the legislature. Page 2 is the general fund. In all seriousness, this is kind of boring because by law, you balance the general fund to zero at every year. So you don't get much takeaway from the general fund. No matter what you do, it ends up with a zero balance. It's more interesting on page 3, the budget reserve account. And let me point to lines 15 and 16. 15 and 16 are really what I would refer to as the most important numbers of the day. Don, what is this all in? Well, when you left town, there was going to be a transfer from the LSRA to the budget reserve account in the amount of $31.9 million. Now it's flipped, and there will be a transfer from the budget reserve to the LSRA in the amount of $54.2 million. That's a negative, so it's coming out of the budget reserve into savings. That's the indication that, okay, and I'm not it's no secret, Kevin knows exactly this number too. That money is available to the governor in his budget in 3 weeks for effective immediate appropriations. He can spend that money, that $54 million is available to him for spending. He doesn't have to, and if he doesn't, and if the legislature doesn't, it automatically rolls to savings. At the bottom of this page 3 is also worth visiting about lines 71 through 101. $139 million, just slightly more than we thought in March, is available in the SIPA account. I know this is very important because the legislature passed a bill to eliminate this account. The governor vetoed that bill and changed what it did. So that $139 million remains there. That amount would not have been there had the bill passed, and it is available for governor recommendations and legislative requests. So that's another pot of money that is available that when you left town, you were thinking that was going to be zeroed out. On the page 4, the school foundation program, you will see the total balance available. Statute directs this to be at least $100 million, and we have improved our forecast for 2 reasons. Number one, that $70 million that should have transferred but couldn't, and then the $79 million where we have overestimated the expenditures on school districts. So that number is substantially higher than when you left, $150 million, $170 million higher than when you left. And all of this is available for your school capital construction, school facilities. They made legislative requests on Monday of this week. This funds would also be available for any changes to recalibration. It doesn't move anywhere. It sits right there. At the bottom of page 4, this is a savings account, kind of like the LISRA, solely dedicated to education, but these funds are not school-related funds. These are not dedicated. The revenues that make up this $88 million are severance taxes. They could have gone anywhere. The legislature directed them here. So that is one of those options. Hey, if you want to take that $70 million and put it in the Common School Permanent Land Fund Reserve account, there's $88 million right here that you can do that. You could do the whole $88 million if you wanted to move that to the 2 reserve accounts. And then on page 5, you will see those spending policy reserve accounts over 5X on the PMTF, and they will be over 5X on the Common School Permanent Land Fund by the end of the biennium. The last page on here, page 6, is water development accounts. Almost no changes here. They have fixed amounts for revenue from severance taxes. The only modest changes you have on the water development accounts are some reversions and other adjustments, and a little bit of interest income that was not anticipated. And I think on line 30, while you were gone, there was 1B11 regarding stream gauge adjustment that the governor authorized $4,980. It's an other fund, so he has access to those funds. Pretty modest change from when you left in March. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm right on time for a conclusion, but I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, questions for staff? For Craig? Go ahead, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Richards. Every time you go over it, I grab another nugget, and so I appreciate that, as there is a lot of learning curve on that. So as we're looking at it, going on to your page 7 again, kind of that broad overview, 504 million, awesome. Going down into the budget reserve account, the 7.6 mil. As we look at these increases over projection, obviously you said a secret savings. I know we see it in a couple different areas. How do we know, like for me, and maybe this is a dumb question, but how do I know like where that 7.6 million, where did that dump into, or is that, can you explain? I think you explained the other ones, but that one I didn't catch an explanation on, just was, in my mind, I had a tickle, so.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson. So this is the amount that is net of the transfer to the general fund and the transfer to the LSRA. So of the budget reserve money, $7.6 million more is going out negative to the LSRA. It's automatically going to savings as well. Those three accounts, general fund, budget reserve account, and LSRA, are linked either in statute or in the budget bill. And all of the excess money kind of comes down into the LSRA. Barring legislative action to the contrary, any money in excess of your appropriations is automatically saved. And that's the line 40, 88 million. And of that 88 million, 7.6 was derived from the budget reserve account. I'd also mention two more quick tidbits on this. Number one, the budget reserve account will expire. It is eliminated on June 30th, 2026. So going forward through this session, we'll start adding 27, 28 columns here, and it'll have a big X or a blank through that. The second issue is this is kind of lacking, and I totally acknowledge that. The comment I'll get is, Don, this is 25, 26. We've got 7 months left of this. This isn't what we're focused on. We're preparing the 27, 28 budget. Where's the other columns? Tell us where we're going to be in December. And that's always a tension with the October Craig, because if we put in 27, 28, we almost are forced to anticipate what the governor is going to do. So we defer, LSO defers to the governor, and his profile will be the first profile you'll see on November 17th, and it will have 27, 28 in there. And then once he makes his recommendations, then we can start building upon those in the subsequent columns.
Thank you. So is there anything more, Mr. Richards, before we open this up for public comment? Okay. We will open this up for public comment then briefly here. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to come forward? Since we have such a small crowd, I'm just gonna let anybody come forward that would like to speak about what you've heard so far. I will give a little preference to those elected officials that are here if they'd like to speak. And Ms. Vaughn, do we have anyone online? This is the hard part about appropriations, is getting people to speak to us.
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't have anyone online who's wishing to
Okay.
speak.
All right. Any comments from the committee? All right, I'm going to go ahead and let us take our break early. And we're going to come back early as well, but I want to make this a 20-minute break. So actually, let's make it 23 minutes. We'll come back at 10:30 to start our next section. 10:30. Against my better judgment, I let that break go a little long, but we had to get some business taken care of offline, so we're back now and ready to commence the next section, which is the Riverton State Office. And I think we have Ms. Ravalli here to present that to us. Are you prepared, Ms. Ravalli?
Thank you, members of the committee. Mr. Chairman, I'm Tamara Revely. I am a staff for the Legislative Service Office and staff for this committee, as well as legal staff for the Riverton State Office Building Task Force. I believe we also have online the co-chairman of the Riverton State Office Building Task Force, Representative Larson. And if he wishes to say anything about the task force and its work, I will welcome him the opportunity rather than speaking for the task force. I'm here to present the bill draft, and that's 26 LSO 0084, working draft 0.4. And if you'd like, I can proceed with the bill draft.
Please proceed, and then we'll get to Representative Larson. We'll be with you in just a moment, sir.
So again, this is working draft 0.4. The short title is Riverton State Office Building Task Force Sunset. This act relates to state-funded capital construction. It terminates the task force, authorizes the expenditure of prior appropriations, and provides for an effective date. This task force was created in 2023 through the capital construction bill, and at the time it was created to convene members of the legislative and executive branch to make recommendations for the future of what an office building that was either acquired or constructed in Riverton would look like. It was set out to last until June 30th, 2028. Well, things have proceeded since then. The task force and the executive branch, the state construction department, have been working since then, and within 3 interims have proceeded to renovate a building in Riverton to meet the needs of the task force and the agencies. So the amendments that you see there on page 1 to section 1 go into the 2023 capital construction bill, sections 9, F, and G, and amend that to change the date that the task force terminates from June 30th, 2028 to April 1st, 2026. So shortly after this legislative session, the task force would terminate. The same change occurs in subsection G. They're on line 8 on page 2 to say that the appropriations for the task force, which were $50,000 to the Legislative Service Office, would terminate on June 30th, 2026. Then whatever is remaining of that appropriation, you see on lines 16 through 20, which would say that on June 30th, 2026, the funds would be reappropriated for the purposes of the Riverton State Office Building project, rather than just revert. They could also be changed to revert to the general fund or otherwise. The bill would be effective immediately upon completion of all acts necessary for the bill to become a law.
Thank you, Ms. Ravalli. Any questions? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just because I believe probably most of us got a version 3 in our packets and we're running off of a version 4, could you just, I'm seeing just for me personally, what I caught right off is that April to March change. Is that all that we're seeing in that revision change?
Mr. Valley?
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Haroldson, the task force met on Tuesday of this week and changed that to be April 1st, 2026, just to make sure that the bill would be able to be signed into law and be effective at the time it went into effect.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to Representative Larson. Welcome.
Thank you, can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
We can.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The task force really, by all except for one thing, really completed all the work that it was assigned to do by legislation last year. The only thing that we really had left that we needed to complete, which we completed on Tuesday, was just to review the level 2 allocation of space for those new agencies moving into that building as they try to determine how that looks for the renovation. We had worked with the agencies over the thus far in the interim and resolved all that, and just wanted to make sure with the level 2 outline that the design team had got the space allocation correctly. We verified that on Tuesday with the committee and with the agencies. So we don't see any need for the task force to continue on.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Larson? Seeing none, Representative Larson, I'd like to thank you for your service on this task force. We appreciate that, and the other members, if you could extend that to the other members on our behalf. I do have one question for you. The funds that are being reverted, you, in your bill draft here, have recommended that they go back to the construction department for the Riverton State Office Building Renovation Project. Do you have any comments on how your committee came to that conclusion for this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, it's similar to the conversation you heard this morning when Mr. Richards talked about some of the reversions coming back from capital construction, that historically we have a 6% contingency fee and also try to account for inflation. That inflation measure is kind of what we were reflecting on. This money has been allocated from the State Building Commission to do the renovation a couple of years ago. We thought that with inflation pressures that just putting the remainder of these funds into that project made sense. It would get it through another appropriations or do that. If the money's not spent, of course, then that will revert at the conclusion of that project. But that was the intent.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your being here and answering that question. Mr. Richards, could you tell us what the balance is of this account right now?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we estimate $38,000 after their meeting, I believe last Tuesday. And not all of those bills have been paid, but I think it's right at $38,000 or $38,500.
Thank you. Okay. With that, is there any public comment on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. What's the committee's pleasure? Move the bill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Senator Grew, seconded by Vice Chairman Pendergraft. All right, we'll work through the bill page by page, starting with page 1. Any changes, any comments? Seeing none, page 2. Vice Chairman Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment, page 2, line 18, strike state construction, strike lines 19 and 20, then insert after the word "the" at line 18, LSRA. So effectively, we reclaim that to the state and put it directly to the LSRA.
Okay, LSRA being the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account. Before I ask for a second, Mr. Richards, is there any concern about putting those funds into the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account?
Mr. Chairman, that was not the source of the funds. However, there is no prohibition from depositing them there. I would defer or request some latitude in the language there as Tamara sees fits. We probably wouldn't reappropriate it to the LSRA, but deposit it into LSRA.
And just a question, if that were deposited into the LSRA, would that add to the 88 million that we see in there now that will be available to us in the next appropriations as we go forward with the budget?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a second on the motion? Seconded by Representative Angelos. Are there any comments on the motion? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a question, and maybe this is for our staff, because I also don't want it to be a deal. Is there any outstanding bills that need to be paid that this would cover that we would be putting them in a lurch for? I just need to kind of get some clarity on that, because I know you mentioned there's maybe some outstanding bills that need to be paid in this realm.
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson, actually, I think there's a fair bit of work left to be done. The design is being completed, but none of the construction is really commenced. So while there was the $2.5 million available, in addition to some allocation from the State Building Commission's contingency fund, there are a number, the project is really in its early stages, so there's a number of expenditures yet to occur.
Okay. Any further comments? Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Representative Larson, and I'm sorry, I got distracted here. If you said this, I apologize, and you explained it, because I was just explaining it to me again. You put this language in here. What was the task force vision for this?
Representative Larson, if you'd like to repeat that.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Senator Grew, when we approached when the State Department of Construction, Department of A, and I approached the State Building Commission, they had an estimate on what the renovation would cost, and they appropriated an additional, I want to say, $8 million, and we had legislatively appropriated $2.5 million, of which I think there is about 2.1 of that left after they've contracted with the design team. So with that, as you're very familiar with, we don't really have a firm understanding of what the estimates will come to till you start getting into the level 3 design. When you're about 40% of the design documents, then you can have a more accurate understanding of what the estimate will be. However, with that said, we've told the design team we've got a specific amount of money, and we need to design the renovation work to fit within the budget. They've got a CMAR to oversee that and make sure that gets done. And so our thought on this is with the time that has lapsed since the funds were appropriated, this would just go in as an inflationary adjustment to some of the costs that goes in there. It's, as Mr. Richards pointed out, it's about $38,000. That's not going to make or break anything. Neither will it make or break anything in the LSRA. We just thought it was an appropriate use for the funds.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On 26 LSO 0084, version 4 as amended, Senator Driscoll. Aye. Senator Grew.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Senator French.
Aye.
Representative Alleman.
Aye.
Representative Angelos.
Aye.
Representative Haroldson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft.
Aye.
Representative Smith.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Salazar.
Aye.
Chairman Bear.
Aye.
You have 12 aye.
Thank you. So that is dispensed with. And again, Representative Larson, thank you for yours and the other participants in the task force effort in that regard. And now we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman, one
Mr.
final
Kelly?
question. Would you like to designate whether this be started as a House bill or a Senate file, or pick that at a later date?
Do you have any concern? We'll go ahead and make this a House bill
Okay.
with your leave, Co-Chair. All right, we'll make that a House bill. Thank you for the question. Okay, now we are moving on to the Development Disability Waiver Program, and we'll have Director Johansson please come forward. We're exactly 9 minutes ahead of schedule. We want to keep that pace going. Welcome to Appropriations. Dr. Johansson, if you would please Director Johansson, sorry. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the committee and the public and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Stefan Johansson. I'm the Director for the Wyoming Department of Health. Good to see you all again. Joined by the Senior Administrator of our Healthcare Financing Division and Interim State Medicaid Agent, Jesse Springer. Since our last meeting, we've had a change in that position. So our former State Medicaid Agent, Lee Grossman, was recruited out of Wyoming into the state of Iowa to run their Medicaid program. But we're very lucky to have Jesse in this role. Has been in the department for 100 years, knows everything about Medicaid, and is fit for the job, absolutely. Also joined by Elizabeth Forsland, who, as you know, has been with us at our previous meetings this interim. She is the administrator of our home and community-based services section, which administers our developmental disabilities waivers and our community choices waiver. Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of keeping you on time or even ahead of schedule, we'll be brief with our comments, mostly here as a resource to the committee to answer any questions you have. But I thought it would be helpful just by way of summary to go over some of the things that we discussed with you all at our previous two meetings. And a lot of detail was presented. You asked a lot of good questions. Hopefully we provided you the answers to those questions or the follow-up materials after the fact. But we really focused the discussion around what I think were three areas. One, in terms of provider rates, which is a policy decision that's been in front of this committee numerous times. The wait list in these waiver programs, as you know from our previous testimony, that wait list has continued to grow over time, and will always do that when you fund the wait list. However much of it you fund, at a certain period in the future, that wait list starts to grow again. And then we also talked about what we call extraordinary care, or our extraordinary care committee, where in emergency situations or in situations where the condition or acuity or the clinical nature of one of these clients has significantly changed, the process by which additional funding can be requested. And we went into some pretty great detail about that during your Du Bois meeting. Mr. Chairman, without bearing the lead here, what we had talked about in August in Du Bois was a potential Department of Health budget request relating to these two programs. While that budget request and all of the budget requests in the governor's office are still in process, I can say that Department of Health has made essentially two budget requests in these programs, really thematically around those three areas. So a blended approach. It won't reflect what you see from the Department of Health, for example, historical rate studies or recent rate studies, 1-to-1 or 100%, but a blend of those three things per the discussion we've had with this committee. So elements in that funding request would include extraordinary care committee funding for those emergent and change in acuity situations, an element of provider rates, including temporary rates that you all discussed on the floor in your last session that were temporarily supported by ARPA funds, which have expired. And third, a component of the wait list, not the full wait list, but a component of the wait list. And as we testified to in both Gillette and Du Bois, over the years, the legislature has varied in its decisions on how to fund and how much of the wait list to fund. And we believe that when you start to get with the average applicant waiting over 18 months is really when there is a top-down pressure enough to look at least request and have the discussion about funding components of that wait list. So again, I don't want to get too specific with the numbers. Those are all still in deliberation in the executive branch and the governor's office, but obviously we're a couple of weeks away from budget proposal or submission to the legislature, and I think that detail will absolutely come out. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Mr. Springer, Ms. Forsland, if they have any additional comments, but really we just want it to be a resource to the committee so you can take us in any direction that you see fit.
Before we get to them, I just want to add, I should have said it earlier, but we do appreciate your contribution to the subcommittee as we've kind of veered off from this particular subject into looking at the rest of the department and in an attempt to make sure that we can fund the direction that this committee is looking to go in this area. So we appreciate your effort in that regard. All right, and please, Mr. Springer or
Chairman Bear, I just wanted to give a few just facts about the program as of today. So the comprehensive waiver serving 1,701 people as of the end of September. The supports waiver is serving 1,244 individuals. And we have 425 people on the wait list as of today. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I don't have anything to add, but I'm here to answer any questions or be a resource as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Director, thank you for being here today. Thank you for all of you being here. You are aware of this committee's commitment to this DD waiver program. I wanted to come and ask today about the provider rates and your understanding of what this committee was looking for with regard to the wait list. Can you talk to me more about that? Obviously, the numbers, as you just mentioned, are not in yet. Can you go over for the committee and for me what we had talked about in Du Bois about the provider rates and what your understanding was with regard to where we wanted to go with the wait list?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Salazar, thank you. I'll take those in reverse order if that's okay. On the wait list, as I've mentioned before, the legislature always has options with how to fund that and what our state policy should be with regards to the wait list. Some states have made decisions in their developmental disability waiver programs to entirely fund the wait list to have a target of 0 people waiting. Wyoming has fluctuated. And again, about 3 or 4 years ago, the legislature appropriated a significant amount of funding basically for us to be able to take about half of the participant or the applicants at that time off of the wait list. And again, that was a time where we were starting to grow over an average waiting period of 18 months, even approaching 2 years or more. And so we were able to fund about half of the waiting list, targeting those who were at that tail of waiting that amount of time. As Mr. Springer mentioned, currently on the wait list right now, applicants on the wait list is 425. By July 1st, it's likely that number would grow. Again, we work within a fixed budget, so we essentially look at funding people off the wait list through attrition. So folks who move, become ineligible for whatever reason, pass away, that's how the wait list essentially is funded. We don't have the ability as the department to create or have unilateral ability to use appropriations outside of what's authorized in these units. So again, Co-Chairman Salazar, I think it's, from my perspective, it's prudent for, when considering programs like this, to have a blended approach, both in terms of supporting provider rates. We want providers to be whole and be able to serve the clients that are in need of these services. But at the same time, there's a consumer-facing element there too of ensuring that we're taking care of families who have children or loved ones on that wait list, which is what I think you'll see reflected in our partially in our budget request. Again, a conservative approach where we do not propose taking that wait list to 0. I think that's a noble goal, but again, we have to consider this, and Chief Executive has to consider, and you all have to consider the entire enterprise of needs that we have across not only the Department of Health, but other agencies. In that respect, I think you'll see that blend in our budget request, and hopefully that's some kind of an answer to your question, Co-Chairman Salazar.
So, Mr. Co-Chair, I have a number of questions.
Go ahead with follow-up, Co-Chair.
So I want to get into the provider rates with regard to your thoughts and comments with regard to what will happen to these providers if we don't increase those rates, which means then we are providing less services for less individuals on the wait list. I'd like, if you can go over with me again the different levels of the wait list. Remember, we had a severe. I'd like to be re-educated on that. And then, can you also go over, is there any type of means testing or threshold with regard to what families must pay before they are eligible then to receive any type of financial assistance and get on the wait list in the first place? I know that's a lot. Just take your time.
Director Johansson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Co-Chairman Salazar, if it's okay, I think I'll have Ms. Forsland answer that last question. It's a bit more technical.
Okay.
But also a kind of a refresher from our discussion in Du Bois. Elizabeth?
Ms. Forsland, please.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, as far as the needs on the wait list, I believe that we had discussed in Du Bois that we do have screenings for individuals to come onto the wait list, but we do not assess their level of service score, which would correspond to their budget. And so we don't perform that level of assessment for folks on the waiting list. And we had discussed possibly doing that or performing that in Du Bois. I think that it could be beneficial in being able to try to project what kind of budget or need that we're looking at to fund specific individuals off of the wait list. It could indicate what their need may be at that point in time. One of the challenges that I do see as well with assessing that level of need on the wait list is that that's a dynamic situation. The level of need in the budget include living situation, needs at that period in time, which can fluctuate over the time that an individual is on the waiting list as well. And so we can, I believe that we provided some information about the ability to pay for those assessments on the waiting list, and we can go ahead and move forward with that if that's what we were requested to do. But currently for the waiting list, we do have folks go through financial eligibility and then a level of care assessment or that defines whether or not the person would meet an institutional level of care. And so those are the two things that we do assess before going on to the wait list, but the assessment that spits out what the budget for the individual would be is not something that we currently do.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I can add to that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar. It's kind of a unique policy decision for the legislature and for the department. If we were going to say we want to target those most in need on the wait list, then yes, we could, as Elizabeth mentioned, perform those level of service assessments for individuals on the wait list. To expand on some of the challenges with that, or maybe unintended consequences, Elizabeth mentioned, changes in situation over time. If you're waiting 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, you might have an inaccurate level of care assessment that's on file that you would need to duplicate and do again to ensure we're setting the appropriate budget. Secondly, as we discussed in Du Bois, we foresee a bit of a challenge with that on doing a level of care assessment for someone on the wait list, depending on what the average wait time is. And let's say you assess someone and it's level 6, high need, very acute individual, but there's no slot. I think there could be a family and a customer dynamic there of we see level 6 acuity or level of service needs, and we have no slot to fund them into. So it'll always be limited by the available budget, the number of slots that we can fund. So there's pros and cons to that model. But I also wanted to address your first question about provider rates. And just as a refresher for the committee, we have hundreds of providers in this program and providers of different types. You have larger scale providers who operate residential services for these clients, and you also have very small scale, what we affectionately refer to in some cases as mom and pop shops, family members, et cetera, that are developmental disability waiver providers. And so the financial condition of that provider network is highly variable around the state. For our larger nonprofit providers, we do has data lag on it, but we do have financial data on those provider organizations that they file with the IRS through their Form 990s if they're required to file a Form 990. You can get some impressionistic sense of days cash on hand, total margin, staffing levels, et cetera. But like I said in Du Bois, say the same thing today, it's a mixed bag around the state. You have some providers on razor-thin margins, some not on such razor-thin margins. I wouldn't say you have a lucrative system where you have providers in this network that are just raking it in and have tons of operating cash flow, but it is a mixed bag around the state. And I think that's it's a difficult dynamic to assess when you all are making a policy decision on funding provider rates because those providers look so different. However, in most cases for your larger scale providers, what those rates support, as you all saw on one of your tours with a provider organization, and it's not, it's common in health and human services and direct care, what you're supporting is the ability to essentially buy staff, pay your staff, pay direct care professionals. And that's what most of the rate studies over the years have assumptions built into them of if this rate model were adopted by the legislature, this would assume that a provider of that type would pay their direct care staff this wage with this benefit package, with this type of health insurance assumption built into that model. And that, again, can be implemented in a variable way across the state. But we try to standardize as much as we can to bring you guys information to say, if you wanted to pay rates at this level, here's what it would look like, here's how it would be implemented. But frankly, Co-Chairman Salazar, it is just a mixed bag and hard to predict. If rates didn't change, what would the system look like a year from now, 2 years from now? Would you see provider closures? Would you see reduction in service or reduction in beds? It's a difficult question to answer because I think it would vary by providers. And I know those that are sitting behind me in the provider group could speak to their own personal situations and their provider organizations' finances. But around the state, we see quite a bit of variability.
Any follow-up? Senator Grew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Yeah, I've been following along, and we've been talking a lot about this, and I know you're going through right now your budget process, and I too will be very interested to see how you all with the first floor balance that. I mean, of course, we all want to try to take care of the list, but as much, and given the times that we're in as far as budgets and, you know, wanting to make sure that we're getting the best out of every dollar that we're spending, I think the key is to make sure, and I know you all agree, or I'm going to ask if you all agree, that you know, taking care of the providers, making sure that getting rid of the list just for getting rid of the list's sake and then not being able to provide for the people we brought off the list is going to be penny wise and pound foolish. That making sure that we actually do the best for the people that are in the system and then work to the day, as the good chairman wants to do, where we can take care of everyone on that list, but do it in a way that's substantial and also given the cost. As one of the folks that lives in an area where costs are more, you know, challenging, I know that that's a key, and I've got more input on this than any other subject we've taken up during this interim. So wouldn't you agree?
Director Johansson. Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, well said. Any further comments? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple questions, and I know this may be out a little bit in left field. One Big Beautiful Bill addressed a lot of maybe rural health care. Have we looked into, is there anything possibly coming down the pike on the federal level that could affect this? And talk about that. The other is, have we also done, talking about, yeah, we could eliminate a list, but do we have facilities and do we have the opportunities to help provide those services? Another part of that, and one of the things that stood out to me, is the fact that cost effectively our wages that we're paying to the individuals that are in these services, providing these services, is on par with fast food right now. And so is it a situation that we can have a conversation maybe also about that? And maybe that is another piece that we can look at, retaining good people, paying them in a way that we could retain them long-term and bring this list down long-term.
Director Johansson. Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, first question first. So the Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed back in July did absolutely have a sizable appropriation from Congress for what they call the Rural Health Transformation Fund. We've been hard at work the past 2 months visiting rural communities, hosting town hall meetings, preparing our application, which we intend to submit next week, where the state, if awarded, could see a floor of $100 million per year for 5 years. The answer to your question generally is yes and no. Could this interact with Rural Health Transformation Fund? Yes, because we don't know exactly what those awards, approvals, and allowances would look like at the federal level just yet, but no in the sense that there are already
in the guidance from the federal government through the Big Beautiful Bill and the Rural Health Transformation Fund, items that are not allowed within that funding. And reimbursement rates, for example, are not allowed to have that funding being used. And I think that's prudent because it's a time-limited grant essentially for 5 years. So they've instructed states that there will be a prohibition on you can't take that money and say we're going to increase hospital rates or DD provider rates, et cetera. So that likely in this discussion or funding people off the wait list, that's already an infrastructure that exists. That likely would not be allowed, and so likely will not be proposed by the department as part of the plan. In addition, capital construction and building new facilities or new capacity also not allowed. So with this particular program as an already existing, optional Medicaid service, these home and community-based waiver programs, it's probably pretty insulated to our state policy decisions with committees like this and with the legislature, which already generates a federal match. This is a 50-50 program. And so I think for the purposes of moving forward with the Department of Health budget, with whatever legislation this committee either does or does not sponsor around developmental disability waivers, probably relegated to that state decision-making outside of the Rural Health Transformation Fund. Does that help, Representative? And to your question, Mr. Chairman and Representative Haroldson, about wages, a simple answer of yes. In many of the services, our waiver programs, even general reimbursements from Medicaid to hospitals, nursing homes, et cetera, it is often directly correlated to direct care wages that provider can support. In many other cases or systems that we fund, hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, physicians, we're not the only game in town. We're a part of the payer mix with Medicare, with commercial insurance, with private pay. In this particular system, I think the providers would also agree with me here. The state financing for these waiver programs is the bulk of the financing that supports it. So in that sense, Representative Haroldson, I think you can see a much more direct correlation between the rates that the state pays for these services corresponding to the ability to recruit labor. I will also mention, because it's a policy discussion that's come up a lot in this committee and with the legislature, right now there is no enforcement mechanism on the state to say with this rate model, this is the wage you would pay, this is the benefit package you would offer. And I'm not suggesting that would be a good way to go, but it is an option. That if there's a rate model or an appropriation or a level of rate that this body would direct the department to implement, it's at least a policy consideration of how does that get passed through then to the frontline employee, to the staff that will deliver the services. But it's an interesting discussion and debate on should the state be involved in that type of regulation. I don't know the best answer to that, only suggesting that it's an option and something to consider. Based on when rate models are developed, they always have assumptions in them, as I mentioned before. What wage do you pay? What benefit package on average do you offer, et cetera? But that's implemented in a highly variable way across the state, depending on the labor pool a provider organization can draw from, what industries, both in health and outside of that, they're competing with. There's a lot of market forces that go into that.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you. And I agree with you. I don't believe it's probably the state's place to sit there and say, hey, this is what you have to pay your employees, because that's outside of our purview. And I've always been of that opinion. But I also know that you can only pull so much out of a pond before it goes dry type of deal. And so I think probably more along the lines of what does that bottom line look like for the rate amount for a DD waiver, I think is probably where the answer is. I think that we need to be careful because, I mean, if we don't take care of that input, we probably don't get to, I wouldn't say control the output, but have that. So thank you for that. And I think that's a good point. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson, yes. And Mr. Chairman, again, happy to answer any other questions, but I would just close with a humble comment to this committee that we absolutely understand that programs like this serve people that are in great need. And it's also difficult for me as the health director to prioritize all of the different safety net and critical services that we provide when we think of folks in nursing homes, our elderly, our seniors with disabilities, our children with disabilities. We have a lot of programs that support, very vulnerable populations. And so I just wanted to make that comment, Mr. Chairman, and make sure that folks sitting behind me and folks who provide services on our behalf funded by the department, it's a difficult exercise in the plates that we spin where everything can seem like a priority, and it's a difficult exercise, as Representative Pendergraft knows, chairing the subcommittee that we've been going through. It's difficult to say this is more important this year than another safety net service, or our folks at the state hospital that we serve. It's just a difficult exercise, and hopefully it comes through that we try to be reasonable with this committee, bring you the best information, point out the options that you have within these programs, but then also on our end through the budget, try to design conservative and reasonable ways to blend these approaches and have some balance there, noting that none of these systems in our budget proposals year after year probably see 100% of what they want, or even in some cases what they need being requested by the department. It is an exercise in balance. Mr. Chairman, just thank the committee for your time on this topic. If we can be helpful going forward, please let us know. And again, happy to answer any questions you have today.
I think there's going to be some more questions, but I just want to make a comment based on your statement there. We hear you loud and clear. I think I've made statements in the past that that's our responsibility. We are part-time, but these hard decisions are ours. We have things like my co-chair and I are on recalibration. We're looking at education spending. We have in the news now, the federal government is changing our SNAP program for the feeding the poor. So we have a lot of different things that we have to make those decisions on. And I'll just say this to the public, that it is our responsibility, and you can steer them towards us and the chief executive as well. But we also need good information from you to make those tough decisions. So we appreciate your continuing to provide the best information possible so that we can make the best decisions on the behalf of the people of Wyoming. Further questions? Vice Chairman Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director, it's good to see you face to face. You too, Mr. Springer, you look taller. And you did. I just want to take a moment before I had a couple questions, and thank you for your patience with the subcommittee. The information that you have unloaded to us over the last few weeks is substantial, and I appreciate your willingness to share it in a thoughtful manner so that somebody from the outside can begin to understand the breadth and scope of what you do. I also would echo your comments about how difficult it is to prioritize when you start looking, what do you say, who's more deserving, or those sorts of things. And I would like the public to know that this is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I appreciate you guys being there. So enough of that. We were talking about the funding for the DD waiver, and obviously we're funding for this particular year. Would you be able to go a little bit historically, kind of give the folks that are here a perspective as historically what this has run, and then also if you would like to share any information on any audits, whether they be internal or external, and what those have done in relation to this program. Thank you.
Mr. Johansson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Pendergraft, I believe we provided this year. If not, we can prepare it kind of an overall fiscal trend with these two waiver programs. Again, they were consolidated about 10 or 15 years ago. There used to be multiple different waiver authorities for this population, kind of consolidated down into two, the comprehensive and supports waiver. Over time, at least as long as I've been with the department since 2013, this has been an area of growth in the department's budget with rate rebasings and rate appropriations, as well as wait list funding that the legislature has authorized in different forms over the years. Currently, between these two programs, these two budget units, I believe our standard budget for a biennium right now sits at just under $320 million on the biennium. And again, there's a lot of fluctuation that happens between Unit 485 and Unit 486, the comprehensive and the supports waiver respectively. Everybody who comes off of the wait list is funded onto what we call the supports waiver. And then as their conditions might change or need grow, et cetera, there's a process to transition individuals onto what we call the comprehensive waiver, which generally has a higher average budget per person and a higher level of spend per person. But generally speaking, everybody that is on the wait list is funded onto that supports waiver. It's a more predictable annual budget, usually between $20,000 and $30,000 a year for that participant that's funded onto the supports waiver. But Representative Pendergraft, it has been, again, we've gone through budget cut cycles, which we went over in the subcommittee, both in 2017 and 2021. And these programs did experience budget reductions in 2017. Some, although the legislature restored or prevented additional budget cut proposals we had in 2021. But we can prepare a chart if that would be helpful, just on the fiscal side of what the DD waiver program has looked like, going back as far as we can. I think you will see, it'll be a little bit noisy, but you'll see some relative growth in that budget there.
I think there was a question about audits and if you've seen any outcomes from those.
Mr. Chairman, I might have our interim state Medicaid agent, Mr. Springer, just discuss we had a lengthy discussion at the subcommittee about our program integrity functions, which is for the entire Medicaid program, but certainly involves any of our optional home and community-based services like these waivers. That is a standardized process where we're doing data mining analytics, also getting referrals for fraud, waste, and abuse, working with federal partners to investigate those, do recoveries, but also payment policies on certain types of service caps, prior authorizations, reauthorizations, those types of things. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'll have Mr. Springer give just a broad overview of kind of that compliance and auditing function that we have around the department.
Please, Mr. Springer.
Chairman Bear. So pertaining to the home and community-based waiver services, we have first line of defense against fraud, waste, and abuse is actually the program staff. So they're working diligently with independent case managers that don't work for providers, and that's been a change that's happened over the last 10 years that by federal law, they required case managers to become independent from the actual service providers. Before, they were employees of the service provider, so you had the planning occurring by possibly an employee, and there was concern at the federal level about whether that was causing overuse of services or good oversight. So now all the case managers on all of our home and community-based waivers are independent. So that means that the planning, the oversight, safety, that's all occurring. And then, once it leaves the program staff, we have a number of audits and limits, all sorts of checks on paying the claims that's in our claim payment system. So we're making sure all the services are authorized, they're part of a plan of care. Every service that's provided is actually on prior authorization, so each provider gets a list of services they're allowed to provide for the month or the year. Once it leaves that level, we have a number of internal functions in our program integrity section. We have a brand new system that was just implemented this spring, which was the second version of that system. So we've done a lot of modernization to bring fraud models, overuse models, and our internal function looks for waste and abuse. If we find a suspicion of fraud, we're escalating that to the Attorney General's Office Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. In some cases, that might involve the FBI or Office of Inspector General at the different federal agencies. Sometimes it's a multi-state investigation. Generally, that doesn't apply really with our waiver providers. Usually, those are much more narrow investigations. And then recently, in the last couple of years, we've also implemented electronic visit verification, which was a federal requirement. So for personal care services that are provided on a one-to-one basis, the providers are actually clocking in and clocking out with a system that has electronic timestamps and geolocation. So the providers that are using that, to the appropriate level, we have a very good sense of this service was provided, where was it provided, when did it begin, when did it end. The client or the guardian, depending on their ability, then signs off on those services to say, yes, they actually did occur. So that is a great protection for a lot of these. Did this happen? If there's a dispute, we can just look at those records. So hopefully this is communicating that there are a lot of controls, a lot of layers of controls on the services, not to restrict them, but just to make sure that the services are actually provided, they were provided appropriately, so that the clients are actually getting the services that are in their plan of care. And generally, I don't want to throw a percentage out, but we believe most of the waiver providers are very honest, doing the best they can, providing good level of service. And so, there's not this widespread concern about fraud, waste, and abuse in the waiver provider community. Usually it's a very small number of providers that usually need recoaching. And a lot of times it comes down to documentation. So we're trying to work through processes to help providers improve their documentation, including their retention of their documents. So if you think a lot about the mom and pop shops, you became a waiver provider, started this business just to help one or two of your family members. You didn't necessarily know, oh my gosh, now I'm in medical billing. So we're trying to help those providers by, in the next year or so, make our systems that we are offering be their record-keeping system if they choose. So that there would be no other expectation for a secondary record-keeping system. They could bill through our system. They could do the electronic visit verification in our system. They can do their record-keeping in our system. And if that's the case, we wouldn't need to have them keep second set of records. And that'll help a lot of providers, because a lot of times the money, if there is an investigation, is related to records retention. So we're trying to make that not be a gotcha on a waiver provider, and really then we can focus our efforts really on other situations that are client abuse, client safety, those type of issues.
Thank you, Mr. Springer. That was useful for the committee. You went into great depth during the subcommittee. And so if the committee is interested in more information about that particular subject, I recommend that you go and watch that. Co-chair, did you have something?
I do, but can I defer to Senator?
Sure. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't get a chance to hear that part of the subcommittee's work, and I'll go back, but I did ask in Gillette about specific numbers, specific cases on the provider front. Did we get that information, or did I just?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, yes, I think we could probably give a high-level overview now if you'd like, or put that at the top of your inbox after this meeting.
If I can follow up, actually, I don't want to belabor the committee's time with it. I would like to see that information, but actually, we've had a little bit of luck in this area, because the fellow who used to sit right here, who actually was the one who brought it up to me when we were in Gillette, our former member, is now in a great position to do something about it. So I'm hoping that if we do get that information, and also maybe even talk to our co-chairs about drafting a letter to the new U.S. Attorney to say that we look forward to him vigorously pursuing any of these cases of fraud that he encounters, because he asserted that there was quite a number. So
Yes. Dr. Johansson, I think if you could just provide that to all of our inboxes, that would be sufficient.
Mr. Chairman, happy to do that. It was either in our follow-up memo following your Gillette meeting or the Du Bois meeting, but we gave a breakdown of fraud cases.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Co-Chair. I guess a couple things. First of all, it's my belief that we're going to have a leaner biennium budget. And trying to help programs that need our help is a difficult decision. My philosophy is during this biennium that we look for offsets to do that, because I have a belief that when we go into the budget session, as far as not only the markup, but in January, these are going to be very difficult decisions, but the only thing worse is not making the decisions at all. With regard to the DD waivers, I believe for myself, 3 things need to happen for me to believe that we will have succeeded in helping this program. Number 1, shorten the wait list. Number 2, give greater help to level 6 individuals. And number 3, increase the provider rates. Those are the 3 things that I'm looking for in this program to succeed in helping the DD waivers. And I'm glad that the co-chair mentioned, we just came from recalibration, where we have an incredible expense. I fully understand the limitations with regard to our budget, and I tried to make that clear to K through 12 education funding. And I mentioned the DD waiver, I mentioned the in-home services. None of this is easy. I wish we had money to take care of everything. But in any given biennium, you need to choose priorities. And this is one of my priorities, and I'm speaking only for myself. But those three goals are something that I would find to be a success if we could achieve that. So, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yes. Are there comments or questions for the director? You made some comments earlier in regards to that second goal, the level 6 more help. I think it would be helpful for the committee. Maybe you can just provide this to the subcommittee, and then we can deal with it at a later date. But we probably need to hear your ideas of how we might go about that. I know it's not going to be a simple thing, and maybe get some information from providers as to, if we made a move in that direction, what would that play out like? We need to do a little forethought for that priority, and it's clear that my co-chair, that's high on his list. So if we could get some more data, maybe that would be helpful. And the chairman of the subcommittee is writing that down now as well. Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and open up to public comment. Thank you, director and staff. Appreciate that. I think we have some providers here. Please come on forward. We've got at least 4 seats here, I believe. So if we can get 4 people at a time to come up. We've got some time, but it is somewhat limited. So if you could come up and just introduce yourself, let us know who it is you're representing today, and then we'll get started with comments. Are you all from the same organization?
I'm an audience.
Okay, are we separate organizations? Are you two from the same organization or different organizations?
Myself and Shauna are with the same organization.
Okay.
And I'm honored to be with another DSP.
Okay, so we have 3 different organizations represented here. Are there anyone out in the audience that are planning on commenting that haven't made it up here yet? Okay, and do we have anyone online, Ms. Vaughn?
Mr. Chairman, I have several people online. I don't know who intends to speak. If
you
they'd
could
raise
find
their
that out.
hands, I'll know.
Yeah, get that information. Let's get your hands up if you'd like to comment online or ask questions of the committee. And let's start from your end, and we'll go this way. And we have about 20 minutes, so if you could keep your comments to about 5 minutes each, we'd appreciate that.
Hello, my name is Joseph Sanchez, and I want to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak today. This topic is deeply personal to me and touches on many aspects of my life. I served as a direct support professional. I also was a coordinator at a provider agency, and now currently I'm a legal guardian for 2 gentlemen who receive services through the comprehensive waiver. My journey in the waiver system began in 2006 when I started working as a DSP. That experience taught me the true meaning of supporting another person. The role of a DSP can range from basic supervision to complex responsibilities, like distributing medications. DSPs are are there during the individual's most vulnerable moments and celebrate their most biggest milestones. The support they provide is essential to helping individuals live the lives they choose, to live within the communities that they like, and be out of institutions. The quality of services DSPs provide directly impacts the quality of life that the folks that they support. Over the years, waiver services have evolved, and some of the responsibilities so have the responsibilities of DSPs. For example, services like skilled nursing are no longer covered under the waiver, which means DSPs are now tasked with administering medications after only completing an 8-hour training course. Think about that. In a hospital setting, only registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and physicians are allowed to administer medications, and those professionals undergo years of education and training. DSPs take this responsibility seriously, but when services are underfunded, it creates a ripple effect. Providers struggle to offer competitive wages compared to entry-level jobs, leading to shortage of DSPs. This is not unique to Wyoming, it is a national crisis. As a result, providers are forced to stretch staff thin, reduce support in the field, and face a shrinking pool for qualified applicants. In some cases, hiring practices shift out of necessity, and individuals who may not have been considered in the past are hired simply to fill gaps. Who bears the brunt of these changes? The individuals receiving services. When service quality declines, so does their quality of life. I urge you not to lose sight of the individuals at the heart of this discussion, and I hope you get to hear from the individuals who receive these services, because their voices and experiences matter. My goal as a guardian is for the two gentlemen I support is that they live the lives they choose in the least restricted environments and be active, valued members of their communities. Waiver services and the staff that provide them make this possible. I want to leave you with a quote from disability advocate or activist Anita Cameron when she was speaking about the Americans with Disabilities Act in the areas where they were fighting for that. A lot of this is about money, a lot of it. That's sadly the thing about us disabled people. There's a cost to our existence. I asked you to consider funding the cost study so that providers can pay DSPs fair wages for the critical work they do. Individuals with disabilities deserve quality services and proper funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez, and I appreciate you reading that letter from a recipient. Questions or comments from Mr. Sanchez? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Okay. Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Shauna Castro, and I'm a direct support provider with Bridges, proudly serving people with intellectual and developmental disabilities here in Wyoming. When I first started this job, I was in school studying to be an educator. I thought this would be a short-term position, something meaningful to do while I finished my degree. But after only a few weeks, I knew this is where I needed to be. I fell in love with working with helping people live independently, with seeing their pride when they reach a goal, with being part of something that truly matters. As a DSP, my work is complex and constant. In a single day, I may assist with medical care, or personal care, administer medications, manage behavioral support plans, teach cooking and budgeting, drive to medical appointments, communicate with their guardian or their case managers, and ensure every interaction is documented for compliance and safety. I help with employment, community inclusion, crisis prevention, and daily living skills. I currently support several incredible individuals, including one who is navigating a very difficult cancer diagnosis. Together, we face the anxiety, the uncertainty, and the physical challenges that come with treatment. I'm there to help manage his appointments, provide emotional support, and bring a sense of calm and stability when the feelings are overwhelming. Being able to stand beside him through that journey, to be someone he can trust and lean on, is something I don't take lightly. I also lead an apartment where 3 gentlemen live together, and I'm so proud of how far they have come. When I first started with them, daily chores and routines were a struggle. Now they take pride in keeping their apartment clean, cooking meals, and taking care of each other. They've gone from simply getting through the day to truly caring about their day, what they can accomplish, and what they're showing up as, and how they're becoming that kind of growth is why I have this part of the work. I'm a teacher, a nurse, a coach, a counselor, an advocate, and sometimes the only person they trust. I am the first to arrive when something goes wrong, the one who has to the one that chooses to just de-escalate a panic attack, stays through that hospital admission, or helps calm someone when they're scared or overwhelmed. This is not a job, it's calling. But for all of that, our wages are determined by the Medicaid reimbursements the state sets for providers. Right now, the rates are simply don't allow agencies to pay DSPs a substantial competitive wage. The most recent study confirmed what we've been saying for years, that the current structure doesn't meet the real cost of providing care. Across Wyoming, providers are struggling to recruit and retain staff because people can make more working at a convenience store or a fast food restaurant instead of doing our skilled and essential work. That really breaks my heart, because when GSPs leave, the people we support lose stability, relationships, and safety. Every turnover disrupts many lives. And those of us who stay do out of love and commitment, often working long hours and taking second jobs to make ends meet in an economy where the housing, groceries, and gas keeps getting more expensive. I'm not asking to be rich. I'm asking to be respected for the work I do, be valued through fair, sustainable funding rates that allow agencies to pay DSPs a livable wage. When the state invests in us, you are investing in the independence, health, and dignity of Wyoming citizens with disabilities. We are the workforce, making the community living possible. Without us, there's no system. Please, as you consider the budget and the rate recommendations, remember that the numbers represent people like me that have chosen this field and the people who rely on us every single day. Thank you for the time and for your commitment to the people of Wyoming.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. That was very heartfelt, and we appreciate your sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Questions or concerns? Vice Chairman Pendergraft.
Thank you. I know I'm probably going to have to end this with "wouldn't you agree?" I'm no stranger to what you providers do. And I'm no stranger to the fact that you don't do it for the money. It is a labor of love, and that is respected. And as respected, it needs to be appropriately taken care of so that you can continue to do the things that you love to do. I know that there are some providers who have actually been forced out of doing that. And personally, that breaks my heart, because there aren't a lot of people willing to do that. And we need all that we have. So I think that this committee is dedicated to doing the right thing, even though we have to make some very difficult decisions. And thank you for what you do. And wouldn't you agree?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on down to you, ma'am, and then we'll come back to you last. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Erica Gessner, and I'm the state director with Bridges of Wyoming. We provide services locally here in Cheyenne as well as in Casper. And I am honored to be able to bring Shauna, one of my direct support professionals, here with me, as well as Katie from ARC and Lisa from iReach, who you'll hear from virtually. I'm here today for support, as well as just to say thank you to all of you for your continued commitment and attention to the rate study. What you hear here today from these direct support professionals is not going to be the exception. It's the heart of our workforce, and the stories that they share, you'll hear, across the state. These direct support professionals, they pour everything that they have into the lives of others. And you know that their wages are constrained by what our reimbursement rates are. And please know that we're not asking for excess. We're just asking for equity to ensure that we can pay our direct support professionals that are doing this life-changing work are compensated to the best that we can. And with that, thank you for listening, for caring, and for your ongoing support of us as the provider community and our essential workforce and the individuals that we support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or concerns for Ms. Gesner? All right, seeing none, thank you again for your time. Appreciate you being here. Ma'am, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Excuse me. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Katie Barker. I have been in this field for 6 years with ARC Regional Services. In that time, I started as a direct support professional and then moved up to being a residential supervisor. While I did really enjoy being a residential supervisor, I came to realize it was not the job for me. So I ended up stepping back down to being a direct support professional. As a supervisor, I supervise many individuals with their different support needs and living situations. I supervise people in individual living situations, group homes, and one-on-one support care based on behavioral support needs. I ended up overworking myself and working more than I was able to work due to the staffing crisis and issues in our field. I ended up working holidays, weekends, and I didn't really have much time to myself, and it took a toll on my health and personal life. So I stepped back down to being a direct support professional. Now, as a direct support professional, ironically, I make almost as much as I did as a supervisor. However, I'm doing that by working 50 to 60 hours a week. And that seems manageable to me now because I was working so much as a supervisor. However, long-term, it's not really feasible. The truth is the system runs on exhaustion, commitment, and determination, but it's not sustainable for everybody in the system. We can't recruit or retain the skill staff that we need without a rate increase. The $24 million is not for fun, it's not extra. It's what's needed to keep our people in the system, clients, supervisors, staff, everybody involved, safe and supported. Please fund the cost study and the rate increases. Let's build a system where commitment is rewarded and burnout does not exist anymore. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Questions or concerns from Ms. Barker, the committee? Co-chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Co-chair. So you're here. Here's your opportunity. Give us a number. What would be a rate increase that would provide you the kind of wage that would keep you doing what you're doing and still provide a healthy life for you?
Thank you, Senator, Mr. Chairman. It's hard to say a number. I do live in an area that the cost of living is higher. I live in Laramie, so the cost of living is a little bit higher. Honestly, I am paid enough. I like to work more because they need me more. However, I am paid more due to the skills I learned as a supervisor. So it's hard for me to say exactly what number would be right, especially across the entire state of Wyoming.
Mr. Kutcher, yes. Well, anyone here, do you have any thoughts on a number?
If I may, Mr. Co-chair, I think the question really is, what do you think it would cost to hire another professional to reduce your workload? If you could give us your opinion about that.
I'm going to pass this question to Erica. Thank you, Senator and Representative.
All right, Ms. Gerstner?
Thank you, Chairman and Senator Salazar. I think all of us providers are hopeful and looking for the full rate study to be funded at the 24 million. With that, it would allow at least my agency for me to provide a $2 to $3 an hour raise for my direct support staff.
And as a follow-up, on behalf of my co-chair, would that, do you see that making an impact on the labor market where you could hire more?
100%. I have very dedicated staff. I am a medium-sized provider. We provide supports to about 35 individuals in our regions. And we've been very, very lucky, if you will, with our hiring. We do a lot around culture and benefits and supporting our individuals, but being able to raise my wages to be competitive around that $2 to $3 more an hour mark would hands down make a tremendous difference and allow me to provide what I think are the best supports to more individuals that need us in the state.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-chair? Okay. Any other questions? I'd like to move to online. Ms. Vaughn, would you bring in the first person and
Mr. Chairman, I have Lisa Rumko, and she'll be followed by Jolene Cummings.
okay, I couldn't hear you clearly. Is it Rumcow? Rumtow? I couldn't hear the last.
ROMGO, I believe it's Rumko.
RMGO. Ms. Rumgow, thank you for being here. Welcome to House Appropriations. Appreciate you being online. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your guys' time. My name is Lisa Rompo. I am proud to serve as a direct support professional supporting adults with developmental disabilities in Casper. I've been in this field for almost 3 years, and this year I was honored to receive the 2025 DSB Direct Support Professional of the Year award. This work is incredibly rewarding, but also deeply challenging. Every day I help people build skills, stay healthy, and live meaningful lives in their homes and in the community. I have helped people learn employment skills, supported them in their fitness journeys, make friends, and overcome fears. These victories are what keep me here, not the paycheck, because the truth is the pay is simply just not enough to make ends meet. Most DSPs earn less than what it takes to support their own families, even while providing life-sustaining help and care to others. We are trained professionals doing complex work, administering medication, managing behaviors, coordinating care, and ensuring safety around the clock. Yet our wages do not reflect the responsibility that we carry. I have taken advantage of my employer's direct support professional certification program that has provided me an opportunity to raise my wages by $2 an hour. However, I still work 48 to 56 hours a week, just to cover basic living costs, I'm sorry. As a single person, I don't have a second income to help me make ends meet. Without adequate funding through the DD waiver rates providers can't raise wages to retain staff. Turnover is high, burnout is real, and the people we support definitely deserve better. Please invest in Wyoming's DSP workforce by ensuring waiver rates truly reflect the cost of providing quality care. When you fund the rates, you're funding stability, dignity, and hope for people we serve and for those of us who have made it our life's work. I would like to thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Congratulations on that award.
Thank
well
you very
done.
much.
Well done. All right, questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here. We'll move on. Please introduce yourself to the committee. Welcome to Joint Appropriations Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jolene Cummings, and I'm a Wyoming parent of a 29-year-old son who has moderate cognitive disability caused by a chromosome disorder. My son, Bryce, was accepted to the supports waiver when he turned 18. During that time, he lived in a home and attended the ABLE program, which is a transition program through our local school district. The ABLE program assisted Bryce with getting a job at Smith's Grocers. He obtained the job as he was about to transition out of the program. It was clear at that time that he needed ongoing job coaching to be successful at the job, but Voc Rehab could not provide long-term services. At the same time, our family situation changed dramatically. Our home environment became unstable due to significant increases in substance abuse, and it was no longer safe for Bryce to remain there. He did not have the skills to live on his own, nor was he readily, emotionally, or mentally able to live on his own without consistent support. This left us in an impossible situation. His budget didn't allow him to maintain his job and obtain safe housing. In that difficult moment, I contacted iReach, an organization that had recently begun offering 24-hour support to individuals in their own home. The director was able to help if Bryce could share staffing with at least 2 other individuals on the comprehensive waiver. We were able to find 2 roommates for Bryce and rent a home. This arrangement made it possible for Bryce to receive the level of care he needed to live elsewhere and to keep employment on the budget that otherwise would not have been allotted to him. Through shared support, Bryce and his housemates currently have staff available to assist with cooking, meal planning, cleaning, medication and management, transportation, and grocery shopping. The participants also participate in Special Olympics, attend community events, and maintain steady employment, allowing them to be tax-paying, contributing members to our community. Bryce has grown in many ways. With technology, he and his roommates have been able to reduce some of the costs to providers by eliminating the need for overnight staff and having staffing through remote monitoring. However, this balance is very fragile. If even one of his roommates were to move to a higher level of care, Bryce's life would change dramatically. With his current funding, he could not afford both his home and his employment. He would once again be forced to choose between having a place to live and keeping his job. This risk is currently compounded by the uncertainty facing providers. If the cost study is not funded and providers continue to lose staff due to low wages, what happens then? Will providers like iReach be able to keep these kinds of homes open? Or will individuals on the waiver be forced back into large group homes? And most importantly, what happens to my son if this occurs? Right now, many DSPs are being paid less than fast food workers, and this work is not easy. Providers must have stable, trained, and fairly compensated staff. I understand the budget constraints are real and that there are many competing priorities across the state, but we must fund the most recent cost study. Because of DD waivers, individuals like Bryce are learning independence, social skills, and employment. They're able to live in their own homes, work, and continue to be a contributing member to our communities. But for this to continue, we must take care of the people who take care of the people. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time and for recognizing the importance of funding the cost study to sustain DD waivers and the dedicated professionals who make their independence possible. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that passionate information. Questions, concerns from the committee? Seeing none, we thank you for your testimony and appreciate your being here. Ms. Vaughn, do we have anyone else online? Okay, is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this issue? All right, seeing none, we are going to wrap this issue up. It is time for lunch, and thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. We will go ahead and move forward in our schedule. As we come back from lunch, we'll go ahead and take an hour and a half, but we'll move the sales and use tax distribution up to the 1:30 timeframe when we return in an hour and a half. So staff, is there any concerns about doing that? Okay, we'll just keep expediting this. Thank you all for your input on this. This is a very important issue. And I will say this, we don't intend to give directives to our staff to draft a bill on this issue. This will be carried into the budget hearings, and that's where we're going to address the actions that this committee will take on this particular issue, as well as the subcommittee providing as much needed additional information to us about this department. Thank you all very much. And we'll be back in an hour and a half. That'll be 1:30. We'll return from lunch.
job.